when we covered the first on record, but the second time they actually did a Batman-Superman crossover, we had to listen to the episode before it to get the lead in, and the one before it was about them dealing with a bunch of like kleptomaniac little people. And yes, I mean all of the things you think about that. Like when I started listening to it after we had like picked out the episode list, I didn't realize that was the plot of it. When like I couldn't remember. It had been a while, and I was like, oh my God, we have guests who are listening to this, and they're like, what did Case do? Welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Jmike.
Welcome back, everybody. So glad to have you.
Yeah, glad to be here for an episode that is honestly long overdue, considering that we are a Superman podcast, and we've been going for like 120-some episodes. I'm not sure the exact episode number this is dropping at, because all of our backups we had recorded pre-SAG strike are finally coming out. But today, we are talking about something that is pretty crazy that we haven't discussed so far. Today we are talking about the Max Fleischer Superman cartoons. And for that conversation, we are joined by Nick and Brendan Connors.
How's it going?
Hey, very nice to be here. Very glad to be on. A little nervous now to be on an anticipated episode.
You know, I mean, we've touched on similar stuff to this at some point. And one thing we didn't talk about before we started recording is we have done a bunch of episodes on the radio show, which is intimately related to the cartoons because the cast overlaps. So this is not like our first rodeo in this era or even really dealing with the people involved in this all. Like, we don't need to spend that much time talking about the cast, although I do want to talk about how, man, they sound weird. Like, I have very distinct ideas of like what all these actors sound like, and there's like something going on with the audio quality in this that like Bud Collyer just sounds very different as Superman and Clark Kent than he does in the radio show. And I get it, it's a radio show, the audio quality is like the thing you have to have. But it's interesting that it is as different as it is.
I haven't heard much of the radio show. Is it as episodic as this is, or is it a little more serialized?
It's very serialized.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, for one thing, most of the stories are like 5 to 10 part stories, and in some cases even longer. And for another, it directly feeds into the next episode every time. Okay. So when an arc ends, the epilogue of every arc's last episode is the prelude to the next arc, so that you're always like hooked on it.
Oh. That's the lovable things with anything superhero related. It's like, well, you can watch this one, but you have to watch this 5-episode arc or read these 10 comics that aren't good, but they're kind of related.
Fortunately, I would say that talking about the Max Fleischer cartoons, it's like the opposite problem, which is that you can watch a lot of them and then kind of forget them because there's a lot of like overlapping themes and stuff. And so for today's episode, we're talking about specifically the Fleischer Studios cartoons. So for people who really want to get into a deep dive on this whole thing, there's like 20-some episodes total of the overall like this era of animated Superman shorts that were, generally speaking, serials or like placed as, you know, pre-rolls for a movie kind of stuff. And they're divided in two. So the first half is the Fleischer Studios, which is famous animation house, quoted at the time because they didn't want to do this production of like just like giving some astronomical figure that not Warner Brothers, because it wasn't Warner's yet, but like that the DC came back and was like, yeah, no, let's do it. Let's do it, guys.
Crazy. That's crazy though. Like.
Yeah, no, they pitched it's like, no, it would cost like at least this to get this done. And then it was still a pain in the ass to do it because like money doesn't buy time. So they still had to kind of deal with all that. But about halfway through the production run, the studio was absorbed and rebranded and became Famous Studios. And there was a noticeable difference in the production slate as well, because this is the first batch of these movies versus the second round that occurred. And the second round occurring happens way more into the World War II period. There's a lot more propagandist kind of stuff going on. We're not talking about those today. They are uncomfortable.
Sort of the opposite of the radio show problem. There was a hard stop at these.
Yeah. The radio show has some stuff going on with it. Like, I'm not going to say that it's like woke, but at the very least, it's like usually like, man, there are particular Germans that are really bad guys out there, and it's like, yeah, no, let's just deal with that. Like, Superman definitely does not like Nazis. we can all agree on that one. So, guys, this is your first time on the show. I'm curious, like, coming from the standpoint of comic book fandom and superhero fandom, like, where do you guys fall? And specifically, like, just in general, and then specifically with Superman, and then specifically with, like, these cartoons. Brendan, why don't you go first? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I thought I knew so much more about comics before I started a superhero-based podcast. I felt like I knew like 5 to 10 things. Because in terms of comic reading, I try to hit like the big ones just to have any sort of, I've read like All-Star Superman and like you go through Watchmen and all. But I was never a weeklies guy, and I never will be a weeklies guy. But I think they're neat. They wear tights. They have capes. This one has a cape. And Superman specifically, though, like the earliest thing I can remember of Superman is Superman Returns, which I thought was phenomenal at the time because I had never seen a man fly on screen before. It made me believe a man could fly. But then you watch it again. But I'd always I don't think I've ever disliked a Superman film or like property that I've seen. But then these specifically, it was actually when it was just 2 years ago when we started City of Supers, which we'll get to in plugs. But I wanted to like get like Golden Age sort of stuff because I thought it would be fun to have like a very base knowledge of superheroes going into it. But I kind of fell in love with these. They're very charming. They're very beautiful. They're incredibly well animated. You can tell that they used all of the money.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was also surprised that you going through the backlog. I was surprised you guys hadn't covered it. I almost felt like when I asked, I was almost trepidatious. Like, are you guys saving this for like an anniversary episode, or is this going to be like the 500th?
I think for me, if you asked Child Nick what his favorite superhero would be, it would probably be Superman. But if you also asked what his character he picks in Mario Kart, it would be Mario because he's on the cover. So I did really enjoy Superman. I think I got into comics later in life, like in college, and it was mainly due to like just the success of the Marvel movies, and I wanted to read more about Marvel. So most of my superhero knowledge is based on Marvel, but then I started getting into that jaded Watchmen, Invincible, The Boys kind of comics and TV shows. So this was a really nice change of pace where everything is just Superman's just nice and he saves the day and he's a hero. But yeah, I'm very excited to talk about these because they're very fun and very beautiful animations.
Yeah, super beautiful. Like, pardon the pun there. Wasn't intentional. This is the thing about Superman, which is that like every other superhero where it's like adjective name, super is the one that we just kind of default to in the English language. That's why he's the first superhero where it was like it must have been a Superman because like that's not a weird thing to say. Like, as opposed to like it was a Wonder Woman who did that too. It's like a slightly different kind of vibe. It must have been a Captain Marvel who could have moved that train. So we've referenced the money a few times, and I probably should actually give a figure. So it was $100,000 that they quoted per short, which in today's money comes out to $1.54 million for 10 minutes of footage for each one, which is so much. And it dropped down to 50 when it switched over to the Famous Studios one, and that's another thing that we'll talk about differences when we ultimately tackle those in a future episode. But for right now, let's talk about these. Yeah. So the radio show's super popular. They are like, let's bring on that cast because common practice for radio shows at the time is that they don't credit their actors so that they can be supposedly the people. So Superman is talking to you. And so the actor, Bud Clayton Collier, had become, pardon me, I almost said super identified, but like he had become, again, English language, but had become extremely like marked as like, this is Superman's voice. He's the one who like brought that whole idea of a Clark Superman change in the voice, the one that, Kevin Conroy like aped for Batman the Animated Series, to really like exemplify it with like the like, well, this looks like a job for, like having that actual vocal change and having that like proficiency as a voice actor to really convey two different parts, despite the fact that it's one actor and it's on an audio medium. And so when they were trying to make these, they really wanted to bring those elements. So they bring the cast over and they make these. And, we're going to talk about the first 9 of them, which I am not sure how often I've seen all of these. Like, I'm pretty sure I've seen all of them at some point, but they kind of blend together. There's some shared elements between them that, like, sort of lend itself to it. But it's interesting looking at these from the perspective of, like, well, we just recently looked at My Adventures with Superman, which is, you know, the very modern update of Superman in an animated format. And you can see the similar elements. Like, you can see how much that these cartoons really shape the Superman mythos, like, in a way that even more so than the radio show, even more so than the comics, like, where it's like, okay, this is the look for the character. I mean, obviously it's got the black S instead of the yellow section, but all the jokes about Superman just saving Lois are in here, like the phone booth stuff, the rapid change stuff. That's all really baked in here in a way that, like, even the radio show, he more just sort of like ducked away and then like Superman shows up kind of thing. Like you're visualizing him constantly transforming in some sort of like, you know, the phone booth scenario or the janitor's closet or whatever.
He does use whatever. He's pretty open about it in these cartoons.
Yeah. There's one I really appreciate where I'm both confused why the scene happens, but at the same time I like that it's a different location, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But on that note, these are all really short, so I kind of feel like we should just sort of work our way through them, because a lot of my notes are just like, man, that's the same thing, right? Like,
for how much the producers paid for these, I would be a little upset. Of like, okay, he just says that line, and I think that's the same animation as the last one.
I'm curious, like, how much could they even cut corners at this phase of animation?
Yeah,
it looks really good. Like,
it looks beautiful.
I forget. Did I share the link with you guys for like the HD remasters that are just like up on YouTube?
Oh no, I didn't realize that there were HD versions.
Like, they look really good, and like they clearly have like the assets to make them look really good. So that part is never really an issue. That said, talking about the first one, which is kind of just called Superman, it's also called The Mad Scientist. This is the one where Lois's model is so different from every other.
This is the only one where she doesn't look like Judy Garland.
Yeah.
They could tell what was marketable in between the first one coming out and the second one. And then they hard shift
right.
it.
Like, very distinct like facial features that just do not appear in all the later ones. Like, all the later ones, at least consistently the same person.
This is the only one where she has a nose.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's lost on the rest of them.
All the later ones, they have that like little anime nub kind of thing going on. So, Jmike, noting that this is coming in the wake of the success of the radio show, I took this as an adaptation of the Dr. Dahlgren Atomic Beam story, which is like the second story in the originals that we looked at. Did that also come across to you? It's not a 1-to-1, and it's been a while since we looked at it. But like, did you get that vibe?
Oh, a little bit, but like I was reading around, and everyone was kind of saying this is like a Ultra Humanite type thing.
Oh, the first villain, yeah.
Yeah. They were like, it's kind of a comparison to that one. I was like, oh, I kind of get it.
I think this one sets up the mad scientist as the default villain for Superman to deal with in all of these. Nick, you brought up Invincible earlier, and this is the one that has that iconic building catch shot that I think is directly parodied in the fight with
I
Omni.
think so. Yeah, that's funny.
Because that sequence is not in the comic fight. It's in the TV show fight. So it's like one where I'm like, I think they put that in there just to be like, oh yeah, no, this is where we get into the deconstructionist motion of the Invincible comics before we come around to the reconstructionist phase. Like, here's a staple of Superman material. Here's Invincible trying to do that, and here's what happens to gravity and to a building when pushed it into a weird angle. Oh, it's going to collapse and everyone's going to die.
When nothing is made of rubber in the real world.
But it is an iconic shot. It does have that kind of rubbery physics that we associate with like early like Bugs Bunny and like Mickey Mouse cartoons. You know, it's there. It's very much the pilot. Mm-hmm. This is what you are used to expecting from a cartoon. Here's a Superman cartoon. Here's, all of that. But it's hitting all the big nails like that you need to hit. Like all those beats are there.
I was a little surprised just because I'm not too familiar with like Golden Age Superman. Because in the very beginning of this, they say that he grew up in an orphanage.
Yes.
Which I had never heard before.
So that is straight up doing the opening from Action Comics as opposed to the first issue of Superman, which does not go into the Kents or anything like that. So also interesting for us to see that here. So this comes out in 1941. So it is several years after a lot of these elements have been added. But it kind of makes me think of the original Ninja Turtles movie, where it's like way closer to the original comics than the TV show that was out at the same time, just because of like production cycles and like what source material they're looking at, or like the pilot for the 66 Batman is like a direct issue adaptation minus the bat Watusi. It feels like that's where they're trying to figure out what they're referencing. They take okay, yeah, Action Comics #1, super famous, like a ton of people like bought it. Everyone knows it. It's got his, like, it has a 1-pager origin for him. All right, yeah, we can adapt that pretty quick. But it's interesting that they're specifically looking at that and not the stuff that has been built out by the larger like origins of the character.
It's much more everyman once you get to seeing Clark Kent, even though he's like corn-fed, middle of nowhere, Americana, kind of doing the everywhere thing when he does grow up with the Kents. But this is truly, you can put any face you want on him. You don't know where he came from. He is just a man deciding to do what's right. They wait like 6 or 7 episodes until it almost feels like a twist that they're in Manhattan.
Right, yeah.
I was like shocked. But I didn't know if there was a Metropolis at this time either.
I'm not sure. It took a long time for it to become like formally Metropolis as opposed to just a city. There's a lot of the early radio show where they just say the city. And there are times where they start to break your brain on if it's East Coast or West Coast even. It's a lot. In that regard.
And as Christopher Reeves taught us, Superman cannot be on the East Coast and the West Coast at the same time.
Not without turning the planet backwards. So this like first episode, however, is very much, here's a mad scientist. We're going to deal with it. The punching the beams, like that's got to be something that they're parodying in Man of Steel, right? Like where like it's so iconic, but they treat a laser, a radioactive thing as if it's like a hose, you know?
But that is, I mean, that's probably like the strongest image from this episode. And honestly, maybe the whole series is him fighting the beam back. And it's like, you truly, like if I try to put myself in like the shoes of like a child who paid a nickel to hang out at the movie theater all day, and this is what they saw, like I'd lose my mind. My brain would melt out of the side of my ear.
Yeah, they would have your actual reaction of, a man can fly. I've never seen that before in theaters, as opposed to yours in 2006 watching Superman Returns.
Yeah, because like there wasn't really much like it. I mean, Popeye, I guess, had like super strength feats that were kind of similar, but like...
But this doesn't play in that sort of like rubber hosey. Well, of course, the animation style is different.
There's little bits of it. You can see that this is the bridge, especially in this episode more so than the later ones, where, again, the buildings, there's like some of the physics are a little bit weird, but then you get to the next one and it seems that they've kind of decided, all right, we're going to kind of lock it down a bit.
It's much more grounded than anything else, like cartoon-wise that I had seen at least, where it feels like a human being punching something or picking someone up or jumping around a lot. They do so many leaps and bounds in these. It's not something I've ever seen in any other Superman property when they're really doing the bounds over a building. But that's his main, when he's like, he does it at the end of this episode, he has Lois in one hand, he has the mad scientist in the other. I think he does it like 3 times at the end of episodes, but like one big bounce and then you see him falling into the city.
Well, you never see Superman in modern day jump higher than a building, but that is like that was his third thing at the beginning.
Right.
I love how in the opening, is this where we get this, or was this in the radio show? The faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive.
It comes from the radio show, but this is definitely where it became like the thing that everyone knows. Like,
because faster than a speeding bullet, you see him like whiz across the screen, and then can leap tall buildings in a single bound. You see him jump over a building, but then more powerful than a locomotive, they just show a train to remind you how big a train is. But it's very funny, and we'll get to them. But there are specific episodes where it's important to know that he is faster than a literal bullet. He is more powerful than an actual locomotive. I was expecting a big building to be a bad guy at some point, but it never came out. Though he does catch the building.
He does catch the building. And that's where it gets like kind of weird with the whole jumping versus flying. At this time, he officially couldn't fly. Because at this time, the powers of Superman were coming from him being a super advanced alien from a planet with higher gravity than Earth. The Kryptonians initially were super beings themselves. And then it was like a John Carter of Mars style, like, and on the lighter gravity of this like smaller planet, it's even more so. Like, how crazy is that? Like, he can just jump around freely. And between these cartoons and the radio show, it was sort of just wiped away in favor of narrative convenience of just like, oh yeah, no, he's just soaring through the air. Oh yeah, well, like, it's annoying to animate him jumping every time. Let's just have him kind of fly. But that's why there's like action scenes where he'll like have to like jump onto a thing. Like, he can get to anything in the air, but he can't necessarily control that much about it, like, once he's up there. I kind of prefer that for his power set, frankly, but it is weird because it's been so long since that actually was what his power set was.
Yeah, and he's very fallible in these. Like, there's nothing to say that he can't die at any point. Sure, he gets shot a million times, but later on we see him almost drown, which feels like something that Superman shouldn't be able to do.
Right. I think that these are where we start seeing in animation that specifically electric attacks, like, look fine to do to get to Superman. Like the animated series from the 90s, every character who had electric powers, like, you would see Superman take the hit. Yeah. Like, and we see that all the time in My Adventures with Superman. Like, it just seems like the kind of thing where you're like, yeah, no one knows how bad that would be. We can say it hit Superman pretty hard. Like, all right, cool. And there's some very iconic moments of him getting this shit shocked out of him. And, like, that's, like, kind of nice.
One of his biggest villains in these shorts are electrical wires that have fallen onto him or are attacking him seemingly by themselves or aren't plugged in right.
I do love in the age of, comics and movies we have now where it's like they have to be so convoluted. And it's like we're talking about, like, multiverses and everything. And it's just very fun to, like, here's the most iconic superhero, arguably the most iconic American figure. And it just a conversation happened was like, hey, it looks dumb when he jumps. Can he fly? Okay. We can do that. I hope that changed the course of, superhero comics history.
Yeah. Across the world, because this then goes on to influence, like, all this development and animation that happens in Japan, to the point that supposedly when they were making the world's finest crossover of the 90s animated series, they had Batman flying because the studio was like, well, he has a cape, so he should be able to fly, right? Like, and they had to be like, no, can you give him a grappling hook, please? That said, the first one is very much like, here's a proof of concept. Mm-hmm. Like, here is Superman. Here is proof that we can make it look pretty cool without it necessarily being too cartoony. Yeah. Like, there's cartoony elements, but it looks pretty good.
It's you get about halfway through this short, and then they introduce the bad guy's Vulture.
Yeah, right.
It's incredibly Looney Tunes. Like, there's that word, I forget who made it. It might be George Lucas, but the word toyetic, where you need to have a character in something nowadays to, like, sell toys. And he was incredibly toyetic. There shouldn't have been a Crypto later. Like they should have strapped a red cape onto him and he should have, like, turned. He had personality coming out of his wings.
Yeah, that was very much like a classic looking, like, animated, like, Vulture character. Like, getting looped in from, like, a Warner Studios kind of situation.
We heard you can do birds. We need a bird today.
Yeah. I'm surprised. So I recently rewatched the Super Rabbit, pardon me, short that Bugs Bunny did. Mm-hmm. That is, like, a very 1-to-1 opening, to the point where, like, I was surprised they got away with it because at the time Warner's did not own the Superman rights.
Oh, of course.
And it's like, to the point where it's like, it's a Boyd. No, it's not a Boyd. It's a plane. Nah, it's not a plane. And I'm surprised that we don't have that Vulture, like, make an appearance in that episode. Let's move on to the next one, which I think is the one that I have seen the most, and I think it's referenced the most, which is the Mechanical Monsters. And I think it gets referenced the most because it allows Superman to fight something, and it's an early one, so that, like, there's really, like, good action sequences there. I freaking love the robot designs in this thing.
So tight.
I think they're so cool in that kind of janky 40s kind of way.
Yeah. They do have that sort of, like, my mom put together 2 cardboard boxes for Halloween sort of feeling. But it's so exciting to actually, like, bring them to life.
Speaking of toyetic, like,
yes.
Like, can you imagine this being released today? Like, you would have so many action figures for these robots, and then just have like a dry erase spot for the numbers.
They look like the mock-up was made of Lego to begin with.
Right.
They copped these for the beginning of Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Like, 1-to-1. They're just like the same thing flying.
Much, yeah. I think these are just, like, really iconic robot designs. Like, for one, it's nice to have Superman fight robots because he can fight robots and then not have to worry about, like, murdering people. But it can be these big action scenes, and maybe they're strong enough to hurt him. And at this point, they seem to be. There's a spot where one of them does, like, the 2-handed, like, Captain Kirk kind of double punch on it, and it's like, oh, that actually, like, looked like it really hurt.
There's something so... I don't know how many robots are really, like, shown in, like, media up to this point. Like, I know we're like past the point of Metropolis, but I don't think we're at like Ray Bradbury yet, where there is like something so scary in just the plainness of them. And like, you can see the electricity like moving through them. Like they almost look like they hurt to be alive. There is something so the other about these that like you need your dad Superman to take care of.
Well, that's a good description of Superman at this era, where he very much is like supposed to be like the ultimate dad or big brother or best friend to you, the audience, the kids who love this stuff, as opposed to like you putting yourself in his shoes necessarily. Like it's more like look at this masculine authority figure.
Did they have a kid in the radio show? I know that was very popular back then. Like Captain America.
Jimmy Olsen shows up pretty fast.
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah, that's actually where he's like introduced, and he's distinctly kind of young. He sounds young. I think he's supposed to be like 15.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah, he and Robin are like the same age.
Yeah, he's like 15, 16. But there are like spots where, it's like the weird gender versus age politics of the time, where like he and Robin take Lois out, and they're like, "No, we'll pay for you, Miss Lane." You can't expect a dame to pay for it. It's like, Jimmy, I'm an adult with a real job. Let me pay for dinner.
It's funny to like cut 90 years in the future when he's like Apocalypse and Superman. He's like a threat to the world and universe.
I also like the fact that like in these episodes, like Lois is very proactive.
Yeah,
she is.
Like she's always doing something, and she's like, "Oh, I wonder what this does." And then she hops into the robot's case, and immediately gets gets snatched off.
Well, and she's always like ducking Clark is like one of the parts that's really fun. Like she's not just proactive; she's like kind of a bitch, and like I enjoy that.
Oh, Clark, you left that over there. Whoops.
She does that. Yeah, there's you find it out more and more where like they keep being so coy to each other, and it just seems this weird thing. And it's like, are we pretending that neither of them know that he is Superman? She's very coy about it. She's like, "Oops, you left this over here. I guess I have to go do something dangerous. Oh, Superman's here, and Clark's not here."
But there's a point in every episode where he does say, "This looks like a job for Superman," which is funny because he always speaks. Whenever he does that line, he says it. He starts it much higher than he talks as Clark Kent. Because he's like talking as Clark Kent here, and then this looks like a job for Superman. And then, if I'm not mistaken, Superman does not speak in these.
Not for I
can't remember a moment where he has
a couple times.
It's a couple of lines, but it's not very much.
Yeah, he's very silent.
Yeah,
but he never sounds that deep.
Yeah, I mean, again, this goes back to the radio show. Like Clark is generally speaking like the upper registers for Collier.
Sure.
I don't think it's that surprising that like when you're trying to like make that distinction, like you'll like really lean into both ends when you're doing like the one line of it. It does seem like the capture. I don't know. He sounds deeper as Clark in these than he does on the radio show.
Oh, interesting. Because we kind of see the same thing later with Christopher Reeves. Like whenever he takes out the glasses and like straightens his shoulders out, like it tells the whole story.
Yeah.
There's no fat on any of these, but like any of the ideas either. They're so cut and dry.
Yeah, I would not say that any of these are decompressed stories. Like
no.
It is shocking how much like we blitz through in each of these. Like prepping for this, where it's like I've got to watch 9 shorts. Oh, it was like an hour and a half at most.
Which is also funny to me is whenever he does this is the job for Superman thing, and he runs into the phone booth. Does anyone ever find the clothes?
They make a point. Well, these aren't like exactly rotoscoped. I know they used a lot of reference, but like when he changes, it's in silhouette, and that seems like a man changing clothes. But like you have to see it every time. Like he's taking off his jacket and his pants and his boots. You know for a fact he's not wearing those clothes anymore.
And then because like on one episode he also like changes in the car, and like no one noticed this at all.
Right?
Like, this guy just rushes in and comes out as Superman.
My favorite one is he's with like you hear Lois is in danger. He's with 3 other people who work at the Daily Planet. And he goes, "This looks like a job for Superman." And then he leaves the room, looks around, goes into a closet, dresses, comes out as Superman, looks around, and then flies out of the Daily Planet.
Flies out the front door.
He does. He flies out the front door several times.
But there always is a moment where he does decide now it's a job for Superman. Like robots stealing jewels, fine. It'll work itself out. Lois Lane has Mr. Magoo herself into trouble in the back of one of these robots. Well, someone's got to go save her.
She is very much like
Obviously.
The Warner Brothers Buttons and Mindy thing, where like with the dog. And But like, she's also not. It's not like a damsel in distress. Like, she's very competent. She does it. She does it because she wants to find the scoop. But like this episode, especially, she's just like Mindy is like walking through like the construction site and like almost like she just kind of crawls into a robot, knowing full well that Superman has to save her.
Yeah. This is a good spot to bring up that this is where we actually see his X-ray vision, where he uses that to look inside the robot. And that's a really cool sequence. It's like that Ren and Stimpy style, like high definition of his face, using it like with his eyes open.
When his eye like bulges out, like the one like turns into like a big upside down U shape. He looks exactly like Christopher Lloyd at the end of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And they sneak it in to the beginning. They're like, faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive. Also, he has X-ray powers. This is the only one where they do that.
Gifted with senses, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I do also want to bring up that this is now 2 for 2 of having just some like weird fucking mountain that overlooks the city.
Yes. It's not going to be the last.
And I now have a headcanon that it's the same base every time and that people just keep moving into it. But then it gets weird because then they say that it's Manhattan and it's like there's no mountain like that.
I'm excited to hear at the end of this because I have an answer what everybody's favorite supervillain hideout is.
Let's move on to number 3, which is the $1 Billion Limited, which is the train one.
More powerful than a locomotive. And he sells what's on the tin. A big plot device in these is that they'll show like the headlines.
No, right.
For the most part, in like the beginning of an episode and at the end of an episode, they'll set it up and then they'll say Superman saved the day. And then also in a secondary headline, and then he vanished. Like that can't be part of the same story. I feel like it's almost a problem at this point that like the Daily Planet needs to stop running headline like above the fold. This is where all the gold in America is going to be next week.
Right. Let's just open it up to I guess more mad scientists, kind of. Like they've got some pretty cool tech. Specifically, I have this note. They have a really awesome armored car. Batman should get one of those. But it's true.
It does hit a button and it like hides their front plate, so you know they're evil.
Yeah, armors it up extra.
Because this is the first like team we see, and they're all in the same uniform. These 4 guys who are going to stick up this train. And for like animation purposes, they gave them all 5 o'clock shadow, so like they could kind of be interchangeable in the sequences. But I can't like, can you imagine the meeting before, where they're like,
"All right, nobody shave.
Nobody shave for 2 days. Have to be anonymous. Have to be
Except
evil
for you,
anonymous.
Mike. I know that your beard is going to grow too fast. You got to shave it at least once. It's going to be too obvious." So it's a weird one because on the one hand, I don't really fucking care about like a gold robbery of a train. Sure. But on the other hand, there's some cool stuff going on with it.
Oh, yeah.
I have a note like, Lois firing back with a Tommy gun. Like, that's some badass sequences right there. Like, Lois is not a damsel in distress. Never. She just constantly puts herself in situations that no person could survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one has a lot of memorable set pieces like that. Because for everything that Superman like thinks he saves the train and like has saved the day, they always have a backup plan. They're like, well, now we got to blow up the bridge.
Yeah.
We had this set.
My favorite part in this one is when he's trying to stop the train and then the bad guys in front of him and they throw tear gas. And that tear gas is very effective.
Yeah, I have a note about that too. I really like that. It feels like a modern Hercules type thing. Like he's like breathing through all this tear gas. It's like he's powering through this thing that should stop or possibly kill any human. And it's like, look at this man. And like, I think that kind of requires us to be back in the mind space of the 40s of like Superman is a man but an impossible one, as opposed to like some sort of alien super entity that's like totally different from what we kind of like conceive it as being, you know?
Yeah. They get the tear gas, which is effective, and they go, all right, boys, let's light him up. And if anything, the bullets they shoot at him make him stronger. And like, I'm sure the confidence they felt over this fighting this demigod. It's like, oh, we found his weakness, boys.
They do, and then that sequence is such a, because you can't show. I guess I don't know. We're post code at this point, so you can't really show like violence. Like if he gets shot, like you can't show his like suit get ripped open or start to bleed. I don't know that Superman would, but you can show that his pompadour is falling out of the gel that he put in. This is the most damage he can take, but it's very effective. Like to see him struggling and sweating.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, he's disheveled. He's so stressed.
Yeah, more than any of these, this is the one that felt like a Labor of Hercules type story. And I know I made the Hercules comparison before, but where it's like a person who is the strong guy hero being like, can you get over how strong this man is? Like how big this man is.
They also at the very end, I think Lois and Clark calls him uncanny. And I specifically wrote, uncanny, stay in your lane. We have so many adjectives to describe Superman. This is anything but uncanny.
I do have a note that this would be modernized actually fairly easily in terms of like doing it like Twitter instead of like the Telegraph stuff.
Oh, sure.
Like how that's being updated with like the news. That said, of course, like the idea that like you got to steal the gold is kind of like pedestrian. Like it's very.
I'm also not 1,000% sure that their goal was to steal the gold. At no point do they have like a bag or a truck. It seems like they're more like they just want to blow up the train. They seem more anti-train than pro-gold, which is, I mean, they're like...
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's like a terrorist move because they're... Yeah.
Not the anti-train part, but the anti-gold part. If this is like a Fight Club plan to like destabilize our economy, totally here for it. Like,
Lois, you met me at a very strange point in my life.
I would be down for that. I'm also down for the next episode, which is the Arctic Giant.
This is fascinating to me.
There's so many things. I have so many questions about why they did it the way they did, but at the same time, it's a Godzilla fucking episode before Godzilla, like by like 15 years.
I had to remind myself. Watching this, I was like, well, wait, when did Godzilla come out? Oh, they hadn't invented the A-bomb yet.
Right? Like,
I forgot what the response was.
But it's spot fucking on.
Yes.
Like, he's got the same frills.
And big buck teeth.
Well, yeah.
Of course.
And I mean, I get it. All comes back to like the iguanodon, like the first like really identified dinosaur, and having kind of a similar body plan to all that. Like, and so it's like, this is a T-Rex. Is it though? Like,
this also very early in this episode, because again, you only see Superman ever change in silhouette either through a mirror or against the back of a wall. Lois is like getting the assignment to go like check out the frozen beast at the Natural History Museum. You see her in the silhouette talking to Perry White, and she puts on her hat. And something about that like very much implies that like Lois Lane is her alter ego. It's like it's an interesting like mirror moment. Like she does get ready in the same way, but you can't argue that Lois Lane sort of has superpowers in like a Domino sort of way where she's just incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her superpower is that she knows Superman personally.
Great perk. You can basically fly.
I mean, effectively, right?
Yeah. Anytime you jump off a building, you're going to start flying in a minute or two.
That purple comet will just like rush on by.
I can punch this robot super hard in about 15 minutes when Superman shows up.
Yeah. How are you going to defeat me? I will scream.
Yeah.
What is that going to do? You will see. I like that they describe the Tyrannosaurus as being mammoth-sized. I don't understand why it's not a mammoth.
Yeah.
I realize that like dinosaurs are like cool. Like I love dinosaurs a lot. Like if I look over at the bookshelf to my right, there's way more dinosaur toys than what a grown man should have. But it is kind of weird. The easy one would have been just like, yeah, no, it's a frozen mammoth. That seems less of a stretch.
Get more eyeballs on dinosaurs.
Yeah, well, and then this is also like a weird spot here where, like, if it was a giant reptile, the frozen and thawed part works better. But if it was actually a dinosaur, it doesn't, because dinosaurs were warm-blooded animals.
Oh,
like, and I know the science at the time did not know that dinosaurs were warm-blooded. They were just like, oh, they're big reptiles, and that's why the anatomy is like kind of lumbering and whatnot instead of being like bird-like. It's just kind of funny that it's like, well, it's like a little more scientifically accurate because of the reptile part, but it's because you think that they're a different kind of thing than what they are.
For the tools you've had, you've done an amazing job.
I do have a note of paraphrasing what the guy says as they're like showing the cooling machines, which is, damn, we have to be super careful while I casually put down this thing of oil right next to a spinning turbine.
This is what, if I love her to death. If Lois just stayed home, none of this would have happened.
Well, I don't know. Like, she's not the one who like causes the machine.
Yeah, to be
fail.
fair, like OSHA wasn't on site.
Right. Like, yeah, and they were just like completely not caring about this whole thing. Where it's just like, we got to make sure this thing doesn't fuck up. You know what? Let's make sure that we stop looking at the machines.
but they do stop looking at the machines. It goes haywire. It goes from freezing to melting to danger.
Very quickly.
Real fast.
Really fast.
It also feels like, just because of how quickly the ice melts, I know like it's compacted and it's thousands of years old, but it does, millions maybe, I don't know, dinosaurs. But,
Hundreds.
It does seem like it's boiling hot in the museum.
Yeah.
It's a puddle immediately.
Well, I mean, like, I guess if this is supposed to be like a New York stand-in or New York itself, and it's the summertime, that flies. Like,
That's a good
like
point.
that concrete just like magnifies the heat. And probably the refrigeration tech was probably pumping out a bunch of heat. So the buildings around are actually super hot.
But I mean, if that's the case, like everybody in that building should be dropping dead as soon as they like walk outside.
New York is really good at creating structures incredibly quickly to house this thing.
Yes.
Because like it seems like they discover it, helicopter into New York, and like, oh, and we built a stadium-sized room for the Natural History Museum. And then, spoiler alert, Superman saves the day in this one. He learns to use wires to his advantage.
Right.
this Godzilla monster is defeated by those wires on the bridge, which I believe this is the second of 3 times we will see that bridge collapse.
They repair really fast. Maybe Superman's helping with that. Like,
oh, sure.
He could be behind the scenes doing it.
Yeah, they didn't have a damage control back then.
Also, this is not the last time that we will see an animal that the size just kind of changes all the time, like from shot to shot. How big is this thing? Is it like a building size? Is it like about an elephant? Who can say?
It came to my mind. I was thinking about Humpty Dumpty at the very end, because the monster starts walking through the water, and there are like police boats shooting guns at it, and there are firefighters hosing it down. It feels very like All the King's Horses and All the King's Men. What were the horses doing? Like, I don't know if they thought they were going to refreeze it. But there's something just very charming about that. Like, everybody get in. I don't know what it is either. We'll see.
Yeah. Just hose it down. Like, why? I don't know. So next up is the Bulleteers, which I have watched multiple times, and every time I start to watch the episode and the name the Bulleteers pop out, I assume it's Rocket Packs, even though I've seen it recently. And I just have so many questions about the plans in this one. Why is it a car?
It's hardly a car. For half of it, it's a plane.
Why is it ever a car? Like, why? Like, it's like, oh, we better land. I mean, like, so it like. It's why is it even a car? Just be a plane. Like, I often lament the dearth of cool, somewhat plausibly explained gadgets in like later superhero media. I just understand this device. Like, it could have been a helicopter. It could have been an autogyro.
Because it looks cool, Case. Okay.
I know, but it's just like, it could have dropped bombs. Or it could just be the rocket plane and just punch through buildings. Like, why does it ever need to land? Except, I don't know. Well, we better drive back up to our mountain. The mountain base that we have shared
with mountain.
I mean, this is episode 5. 3 of the 5 have had the same basic layer.
This was probably my favorite beginning, because when they zoom in on the Bulleteers, they just kind of have these like henchmen like voice. They said they should sound like that, and they look ridiculous with their kind of hoods on, and they just have this thick New York like, "Hey, Superman, we're gonna come get you."
I also have a note of the mayor being like, "Damn, criminals have a fast car, so we better start martial law."
Yeah, sandbags in the streets.
Yeah, like that is not a proportionate response.
What was their? They wanted the treasury, like just like all the money in the treasury or something.
Yeah,
it was also
money,
sort of
whatever.
Big, yeah, because they're just punching holes in buildings,
right?
Which they start with the police station, which I was kind of on, like, honestly on board with the Bulleteers.
Yeah, no, that works.
But it's funny because the car, it does have wings, and it'll retract the wings. I guess it's kind of implying it gets to speed, and then it can just zip through a building,
right,
shaped like a bullet. But the way that Superman defeats the plane at the end is that he tears off the wings. And I wrote, Superman, no, they don't need them. You have no idea. You've made it a weapon. See,
my note is he grabs them, and then he just like chucks the plane at someone's farm, and it like blows up. Like, you just see it hit countryside, but because of the way they drew everything, it's not just like undisturbed nature. It's like very clearly like sections of farming everywhere. So it's like someone's barn blew up.
He has a duty to the city. He has a duty to New York City, not state.
Fuck you, Yonkers. But yeah, like, again, every single time the name came up, I was like, ooh, is this one with rocket packs? Oh, wait, no, I've seen this one.
Just the car. They have the best costumes as well because they're shaped like bullets themselves. Which I feel like, more to your point, you'd imagine that they would have individual bullet packs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, no, we've got a cool plane, which admittedly it's a cool plane car thing, but like, it's one that just like kind of feels like, well, we got criminals. What do you want us to do?
Also, just in terms of construction, the Daily Planet, it more or less keeps its geometry and it's like map throughout the stories, but sometimes they just like come up with a cool shot and they need something else. Because at the very beginning of this episode, Perry White's office has 2 doors so that Lois and Clark can enter it at the same time from across the room. He's just in the middle of a hallway. Or one of them was in his bathroom. Like, there's really no
Also
way to
possible.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I think that Perry White looks like Bobby Hill in these. I started seeing it. I couldn't stop seeing it.
Oh, Bobby. That's my purse.
To the mad scientist.
Yeah.
I don't know you.
Speaking of mad scientists, let's move on to the magnetic telescope. Because,
This is the most mad scientist. This is the platonic ideal.
yeah, this is one where it's like just truly just a scientist who is, crazy as opposed to like, I'm going to steal shit. I will note, so this is the time where I actually stopped to make a note that I'm glad that Siegel and Schuster are credited on all of these. I believe that's all of them total, but like this is the one where like I was like, oh, that's nice. I should write down that part there because they weren't always credited on all the Superman stuff.
No, they were not.
And my note is it's that damn mountain again. Also, funny sidebar that these days there are a lot of electromagnetic telescopes that are looking for radiation signals and so forth.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's like actually not that out there concept wise. But also, this episode is such a wasted opportunity for things that haven't been invented yet in Superman lore. Like, if this episode came out once the idea of kryptonite existed, it's such an easy way to bring kryptonite to Earth and explain why it's there. Yeah. But it just didn't exist yet. Like, they hadn't come up with the idea because Clayton Bud Collier had not had to take a week-long vacation, and so they hadn't had to come up with an idea for why he's unconscious for the entire time.
He does start as a scientist. Like, he talks to the press, he talks to like the army. He was like funded to do this.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the US's fault to put him in the middle of a metropolitan area to pull comets out of the sky.
Also true.
That's his problem. That's their fault.
They're like, well, we had this fucking base already set up from some mad scientists. It was easier to set it up there. They already had the power runs.
The episode starts. He brings a comet out of the sky. There's chaos. So he talks to the press and the army. And he says, you guys, you don't understand. I really want to do this.
Right.
I wanted to do this for so long. It's going to be awesome.
For science.
For science. And he has, it almost looks like the smelloscope.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. And the handle, it's a wonder that they get like a good sense of it when like Lois takes the wheel later on, because there's 2 sides of the lever. It's forward and reverse. I couldn't infer which of those is good and which of those is bad.
Right. Like, what's it going to do?
Which is going which way?
Yeah. I have a note that like the cops screw things up worse, and that actually makes us a weird parallel to Krypton with like the scientists being like, no, like don't like we have to make the world better this way through science. And it's like, you crazy mad scientist. This is the one where Clark leaves the Daily Planet and takes a car and then like has to stop in the middle of it and transform into Superman, which again, I appreciate that we are getting a different transformation sequence. Like considering like the legacy of like Sailor Moon and stuff like that, where like we want this kind of shonen transformation or a Hinchy transformation, pardon me. But at the same time, why does he take the car? Like, just go as Superman. like, is he just trying to like keep his cover, being like, well, I need to have receipts to like expense, otherwise, like, they'll be like, well, like, how did you get there? It's like, well, I have a Metro Pass. Like, what?
He has a flexible spending account. He doesn't have to technically put these at the end of the month. These comets look so cool. Like, I still have never seen anything like these in 2D animation. These, like, flashing balls of fire and white light.
Mm-hmm. Well, that and, like, the pieces flying off of them are destroying, like, everything in the area. There's, like, cars driving down the street, and then, boom, they're gone.
It's cataclysmic.
People walking down the street, boom, they're gone, too. Everybody gets them.
Yeah. Also, Superman can't win this one just by punching things. Like, he wins by using his powers to boost a scientific device rather than using his powers to just, like, punch it into oblivion or whatever. And
Once
I like
again,
that.
He befriends wires.
Yes.
He becomes a wire. He connects, like, because it, like, snaps in half and he, like, the current goes through it.
Right. Which is also, like, a really iconic shot for Superman. But, like, that's him using the invulnerability power to solve a problem that he couldn't hit. And that's, like, a really cool aspect of that. Like, where, like, no, he has to be this man of science that he can get away with doing, you know, this incredibly dangerous thing by virtue of the powers that he has. That's so fun and cool, and a thing about Superman that often is overlooked in adaptations, and I really like it here.
These sort of go on a run, I'm just realizing, where there's a mad scientist, but there's nothing to punch in, like, the next three. It's all, like, natural disasters. We have the comets coming down, and then we'll see an earthquake, we'll see a volcano. Like, it's all, like him versus the environment. Like, Superman is stronger than... Atlas has it on his back at this point.
Right. So I really like this one. It comes across very strong, even though there's some audio that, like, sounds like it's through, like, a can on a string at points. Like, the mad scientist, like, it's like, well, what the fuck is the filter going on there?
I am curious about that because Clark hardly says anything in this episode too. Like, in the first half, like, when he's Clark before Superman, I think he only says the thing to the driver. He does, and then of course the famous line. But he doesn't talk to Perry. He's in shots and then he leaves.
Yeah,
bad audio week for Fleischer Studios.
Maybe. So next up is the electric earthquake, and I have some complicated feelings about this episode.
This was the first time I was
again,
on the villain side.
Once again,
or how cartoon, or at least his explanation.
But why does he make the complaint to the Daily Planet?
It's weird. But, like, okay, so for anyone who's not familiar with this one, because, like, we're at the point now where, like, these all kind of run together. Like, it's another mad scientist situation with blah, 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 blah. This is one where the mad scientist, it's set up where I'm guessing he's Lenape, like the tribe that occupied Manhattan before. And he points out, like, hey, Manhattan is stolen territory from my people. Like, you guys should give it back. And they're all like, ha, we can't do that. Like, that's crazy talk. But he's not wrong.
No.
He's not wrong at all.
But then he does sort of take it to the, if I can't have it, nobody can.
Yes, that's where he goes too far. But also, the way he goes too far is he's a mad scientist. And you know what? Yes. Like, I actually appreciate that, like, well, you know, you could have gone with a Native American stereotype, but instead you made him a mad scientist. And I kind of appreciate that. Like,
this and the magnetic telescope are, like, two of the strongest, like, sci-fi concepts.
Yeah.
Because he just has these big wires have a mind of their own.
Yeah.
Because I guess they're in the Hudson, and they're just sort of clipped to different points on bridges to rock masses under the water. And then Superman's, like, pulling them up at one point. And he goes up to breathe because he has to, because Superman can drown apparently. And, like, they bring him back down. Like, there's one or two wires that go, no, Superman.
I do love that he has an underwater base. Like, that's a nice change of pace here.
Looks like a teapot.
Yeah.
And it has a front door. He takes an elevator down to it, but there's a big front door.
Well, maybe when it was under construction or something to that effect.
Oh, sure. For the most part, whenever, like, Lois comes face to face with a mad scientist, they're just like, they grab her and they throw her wherever they're going to put her. There's an interesting relationship that he sees her spying on him. There's only one way down in the elevator, and he, like, invites her to, like, come see. I want you to come see, like, my genius here, before having a metal chair that can strap her hands and legs down. Which, when you live alone, don't we all have a metal chair?
Some weird Tinder dates he's had. I have a note that, like, there should be an episode of Yo, Is This Racist on this particular short, because, like, I actually don't know where this falls. Like, yeah, he's the bad guy ultimately, but again, it's, like, nice that it's not going on, like, racist tropes. Like, he has valid points. They have valid points of, like, well, we can't all just leave all of a sudden. It's, like, kind of insane to do this. I don't know.
But I feel like at this point in, because we're getting into, like, the prime time of, like, American Westerns. There's one solid depiction of Native Americans in American culture at this point. So it is nice to see one, you know, like a modern scientist.
Right.
But there's also, like, just the idea that like this is like that we're on stolen land, that it's almost a land acknowledgement of an episode. That's not the angle that they have ever, like that's not what John Wayne is talking about.
No.
Like John Wayne doesn't meet a tribe and go, "Oh, you guys used to be in Wyoming? That's terrible."
No, of course not John Wayne.
Not John Wayne.
John Wayne would be like, you pansies, let me go dodge a giraffe and then yell at you.
Canonically in this is how old is Clark Kent, and is he a draft dodger?
There's different reasons in each version, like if he's been involved or not. I think the deal in the comics is that he accidentally read the eye chart in the wall behind the eye chart he was looking at, like he focused too hard, and so they marked him as a 4F.
That's really good.
In the radio show, he actually was a war correspondent, so they could do like war stories.
Wasn't there also at one point, somebody was talking to me about this recently, that there's at least some line of comics where Hitler had, as featured in the Dial of Destiny, Hitler had the sword that that made Jesus bleed.
Oh,
and something about like having
the Spear of Destiny, yeah.
Yeah, having the Spear of Destiny, like he like kept superheroes out of Germany.
So that was the thing in the comics that they used to try to explain it, because there are those World War II propaganda pieces, like the slap a Jap, you can buy a war bond ones and stuff like that, which are of their time. Yeah, so there was the comic strip where like Superman ends the war. Usually it's a retcon reason for why like Hitler had the Spear of Destiny, and so that held people back. Jmike, you might remember we looked at the Golden Age, and so they talk about how that was actually a story concocted by the US press, and the real reason is that they had like a superhuman that could neutralize powers as like their reason.
Ooh.
Which strikes me as the kind of thing that, even though it was a James Robinson script, that feels like a thing that Roy Thomas would have introduced when he was doing All-Star Squadron. So that feels like what the Bronze Age explanation for like why the heroes didn't get involved during the Golden Age. I don't know the full history of it because it's always like a little complicated on that one. And like Marvel does do the superhero stuff, like obviously Captain America, and there's like the Invaders, and like, there's a lot of stuff going on. Like it's a big war, and like some of these would actually make a big difference, but like other guys, like I don't know, like Our Man would be helpful, but like would he necessarily like turn the tide of the war? Probably not.
If you put him on the right boat.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like that's my point. Like they'd be useful for a battle, but they wouldn't necessarily like win the war.
Sure.
But yeah, like looking at the Electric Earthquake, like I enjoy a lot of it. It's just like kind of like complicated to even decide where I come down on it. It's like they make shockingly good points, and then that guy's still the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we see it in Black Panther.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, every Marvel where it's like this leftist guy. It's like, like, oh, our people have been, tortured, enslaved, and all that. It's like, yeah, so we're gonna kill everyone. What?
That is a strong
too far
in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when they like humanitarian group are the evil bad guys that Captain America has to fight, and then all of a sudden they're like, kill the hostages.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Volcano. And my first note is that is a different actor playing Perry White.
What? How could you tell?
Because I've listened to that goddamn radio show a lot. And also, like, it just really stood out. And I was like, oh, that's not Julian Noah. Like, I looked it up. I was like, yeah, he's not credited. So, no idea. But shocked me.
This one also, I don't know if this is a big thing in the radio show, because we really haven't seen it up to this point, but Perry White is sending them on a story to report about this volcano that's about to erupt. And he's like, Lois, Clark, I know you hate each other. I know you can't stand working with each other, but just this once, you guys are going to have to work together. And Lois doesn't like Clark in this episode.
Oh, she's so devious. Like, this is the one where she steals his press pass.
Yeah, she hides the press pass.
Yep.
That's so much of it. I mean, like, it felt silly because he's like, he hands Clark, here are the train tickets. Lois, here are the press passes. And I was like, what are we doing?
Where he goes back to the lobby and waits.
You already have two on. That's so, when it's erupting and he's just like fumbling with his hat in the waiting room.
If I was like a 6-year-old in 1941 and this was my day, I'd be so annoyed. Because
he goes up to the desk and he's like, I need a new press pass. And the guy's like, that guy's not in right now.
Right.
Very bureaucratic.
The ultimate enemy of Superman, red tape. Also wires. This has a lamer wire sequence in it. But But I don't have fucking much to say about this one. Like, yeah, it's a natural disaster. This is the spot where I'm like, how many more of these are we watching for this one?
Well, this one sort of, Terror on the Midway, the ninth episode, has an incredibly different tone, I feel.
Yeah.
Than, like, this is the last one that's very, like, happy-go-lucky, in the daylight, Superman fighting foes. Terror on the Midway is almost scary when you get into, like, the fights of it.
Yeah, it's a King Kong monster parody episode. Yes. And another one where, like, if this was later in the pantheon of Superman stuff, it would have been Titano, and it would have been Beppo the super monkey as the monkey. Instead, it's just this, like, what is it, Gigantic? Like, is the name, like...
Gigantic and Mumbo.
Yeah.
Mumbo, phenomenal name for an elephant.
So, you know, it's like, well, all right, it's King Kong. They're doing King Kong. It's a gorilla that is of very different size every time he's in frame. Yes. Sometimes he's just a bit bigger than Superman. Other times he is bigger than the building. There's a spot where he's bigger than the elephants, and I'm like, well, that's starting to get into the crazy space. And then sometimes just dude-sized.
I feel like we don't spend enough time on the clown who is dancing with a line of elephants doing a comedy line, like Wonderful. Like, that guy's from Krypton. And I feel like he should have had much more of a sway in the ensuing chaos. There's nothing malicious about this. No, there's no plot here.
Yeah.
Nobody releases the elephants to, you know, to rob the circus or to kidnap somebody. Like, just like a couple ropes snap. And what are ropes but the wires of the circus?
Yeah, very true. I mean,
you also see a couple. This is a very specific reference. You see a couple of children in this episode, and I don't know how many other kids that we've seen. And one of them looks so much like Nancy.
I thought that too.
Nancy. Yes, this feels like a direct sequel to that very charming 4-panel where she goes to the bank to get out a loan, and he's like, "What do you need 50 cents for?" And she's like, "The circus is in town." And then the two of them are seeing the circus.
Right.
This feels like what happens after that.
I thought that too. I was like, that can't be, but like I like, because they're very well detailed in and look like comic strip characters.
Yes. They look like we were supposed to know who those kids were.
Yeah, exactly. So I enjoy that the gorilla just kind of gets out because the monkey sort of allows for that situation. All of the animals, I like how they're animated. I think they all look really good.
Yeah.
The conga line of the elephants is so good, but like the gorilla details are really good. You know, size aside, like his foot design is like, oh, that's actually like the right proportions of like where the gorilla's like thumb is on their foot. Like it's not just a hand, like their proportions are like, it's kind of like halfway between foot and hand. That looked pretty good.
The panther's shoulders like move in that way that you don't see until like, you know, the Jungle Book.
Right. Yeah. I love that they have Superman fighting these like big animals. Like that's a cool element. If this wasn't like episode 9, if this was like episode 1 or 2, it'd be like, oh yeah, like this, you know, incredible man is fighting like the mighty panther and the lions and such a fierce gorilla. But at this point he's fought robots. He's fought fucking volcanoes. Like it's, you know, not quite as like high up on his like feat sheet as you would have for anyone else.
I don't know how much violence that they can show. I feel like there must have been some like toes stepped on with the censors because there's a great deal of this that's in shadow. There's a very clever moment where Superman changes and like when you're seeing the silhouette, he just like ducks behind like a circus tent or something. And then you see the panther's silhouette jump into it and then he jumps out as Superman pulling it off of him. Like especially when it comes to the animals like getting out and like people being attacked. There's a lot of shadow, there's a lot of interesting shots. There's also there's like a 10-second long like close-up of Superman's butt.
I have that note. I've been waiting to say this out loud.
It's so well detailed.
No, my note is close-up on Superman's butt. Look at them cakes.
Because like the way that they like Superman's like wrestling with the ape on the ground and then they cut to this shot and it seems very like it seems like B-roll, like B-team, like they just got it on the day and they need to like move them in time. Like it's not a cartoon and they could do anything. But they just use it to take a good 10 seconds to show you why he's the Man of Steel.
Like for a long sequence of his butt in those like strongman trunks. And you're like, yeah, that man works out.
I would be so remiss to miss that the way that Superman gets to the circus is, once again, he has a driver. And he gets in and he goes, Get going, Joe. See what's cooking. Like, Joe's supposed to know where the chaos is coming from in town. He does not fly to the circus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he takes a taxi, which is like, again, like if he's trying to like make a plausible scenario of Clark Kent being on site, I'm like, okay, cool. But like, just understand the harm you are potentially causing by not using your own power.
Yes.
But yeah, I like this one overall, just in terms of like it's got good action sequences that we haven't really seen in a while. Like he actually gets to fight some stuff, which is always fun.
He doesn't tussle with anything his own size for the most part, which is like Superman never really harms a person. Like he'll like pick somebody up by their scruff, but he never like punches somebody in the face.
Right, because would be murder. Yes, it's a King Kong parody. Yes, it's the second kaiju episode somehow.
Yes. 15 years before that was a phrase.
I know, right? Like,
yeah.
And I feel like it should have been earlier in the slate, but it was a nice mix-up. A lot of the stuff I really like about the Fleischer cartoons are on display here. I really enjoyed that. So a good way to round out that first like run of Fleischer cartoons. Before we get into, famous studios with like the the next episode's the Chapin tours. Which is just rough.
Do you think that was the same guy who wrote the Bullet Tears?
Oh God.
Like, he's just a man for portmanteaus.
So I will say, like, it was really fun to go back and look at these. Like, they are so short and so to the point, and they do run together. Like, there's so many times where it's like, that's definitely the same mad scientist base, because why the fuck wouldn't it be? And like, it would be more interesting if like when he's dealing with the magnetic telescope one, if like the robots like are activated by accident and like come out or something. But that's just not how they were working at the time. And so what are all your takeaways from watching these? Like I've seen these before. Like I don't remember them all very well because they do kind of run together. But I know I've watched them all at various points. I was happy to rewatch them, but I'm curious what your takeaways were if you guys hadn't all seen them before. So why don't we start with Jmike and then kind of go around?
I mean, I remember seeing these at multiple times from like a distance. I'm like, oh, that's the Fleischer things. And you keep moving. Like, oh, those are really cool. Oh, but I'd never like really stopped and like watched them. And that's how I learned that Superman's greatest weakness is electricity. It's not kryptonite because he can fight it off now. It's electricity. But yeah, these are really, really cool versions of the character from way back in the day that people don't really appreciate that much because, it's old school Superman. It's not the new stuff. But yeah, I feel like everyone should take time to watch these just because like they're an amazing piece of art from that time period.
Yeah, I think they exist by reputation more than necessarily people having like really sat down to watch them.
Yeah.
Everyone refers to them when they talk about classic Superman. They know the opening sequence, and probably they know at least one of the first 4 episodes fairly well. But it does seem like they kind of are a blip for a lot of people. And like I said, I don't remember them that well, even though I've seen them a bunch of times, because they are kind of like a lot of the same setup of here's a mad scientist, here's his mountain lair, and here is Lois being a bitch to Clark, and then rinse, wash, repeat. Brendan, what are your thoughts on all these?
It's funny because, again, I only watched it for the first time a couple years ago, and I watched them a couple times before we did this episode. But if I'd never seen these before and you asked me to write what I thought one of these was gonna be, you could nail it. And folks at home, if you haven't like watched these, if you've only been half listening to this episode, you could write one of these and they would end up like it almost feels like reading the dictionary again in a very good way, where you've absorbed so much of this, and sure, you've never sat down and like taken it in, but this is like the mythos that like culture has left in anybody. And it's just exciting to get to sit down and like go back to the beginning, read the source material, brush up. And honestly, I don't know exactly the route that James Gunn is going. In Superman Legacy, is the name of it. But I really hope they get back to basics. Like I think this is the time to go back to full spandex and big glasses.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely hope. Like Superman and Lois had him wear this exact suit in all like the flashback sequences of like when he was first getting started, and that got a lot of fanfare. So there might be that kind of vibe. Nick, what's your big takeaway from this?
I was I think probably 10, 11 when I started really getting into superhero movies and just lore and comics. And that was when I enjoyed it. Now I'm kind of this 27-year-old cynic where I look at everything and what's the new thing that came out? Oh, this is awful. This does this does this. And it was very nice to see something from 85 years ago that is just this is what superheroes are. We're kind of coming up with it on the fly and all this nice stuff. Here's like a 7-minute, very tight window of what superheroes are. And it's fun to pick it apart now, but like, I think it's a very cool idea of like a 6-year-old having his brain explode watching that in a big theater. I totally recommend it. It's very beautiful. It does this kind of cool thing where, like, especially in the Mad Scientist, where you have realistic animation, but you also kind of have this fun, rubbery rotoscope, Fleischer type animation. So definitely recommend it. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think it's kind of is a palate cleanser for all like the cynical superhero content I'm consuming nowadays.
Yeah. We've mentioned this before. It's free. Like, this is super public domain. Like, it's available on YouTube. You can easily watch it.
I was amazed to find that out.
Yeah.
That it's properly in the public domain.
So it's easy to come across. And if you prefer to have physical copies, like, those are readily available as well. Like, so it's not hard to get a hold of and watch these. And good versions of them, which I think is like a really nice part of it all. Like, the remasters are really good looking and really fill the screen with color in a way that's like, aesthetically pleasing looking at these pieces. I wouldn't want all my Superman to be this, but I am very glad that this is here. Like, this is that snapshot of like of the tropes being codified for the first time. Everything you can guess, like everything you would expect and you would guess about each one of these is very much present in each of these, except for the bulleteers not being goddamn rocket packs. They're all strong pieces, and if it was only one of any of these, it would be considered like this great masterpiece of Superman lore in general. As it is, the first 2 or 3 are probably the ones people remember the best, just because like they probably had the most replays. They're the ones that introduced the stuff. The robots are so iconic in the Mechanical Monsters episode, like the holding the electric charge part. Like there's so many parts to all these that like those shots stand out so well, and you remember those moments really distinctly. And it's just a matter of like, well, which plot was the thing that mattered for it? And they almost don't really matter, because it's always like, well, which Mad Scientist was it? It was this one. But it allowed for that cool sequence. And there's a lot of cool sequences in all these. And watching all of the Fleischer Studio $100,000 per episode cartoons takes 90 minutes. And there's 9 of them. So you can watch like one and then like go about your business and you're fine. Like, it's like a TikTok approach to superheroes.
Yeah. And even if one is boring, which once you get to like the third, he's fighting Earth one, it's over in 2 minutes. You get to the action, you're like, oh, this is 2.5 minutes left.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend. I mean, like, it's easy to say, like, yeah, you could go check out all of them. I would say definitely check out the first 2, because those are definitely ones that people reference a lot. And then, I don't know, I would probably say the Arctic Giant and Terror on the Midway, just because they're kaiju fights, and that's like kind of fun. And like, they just announced another King Kong X Godzilla movie, so
sure.
So you could go check that out. And like the Magnetic Telescope, I think is my other one that I like really would stand by as being like, yeah, fucking check that out.
If I had to, I think it's fun to all say. Bulleteers, my number 1 with a bullet. Though the Electric Earthquake does have its charms, and also including far and away my favorite bad guy hideout. That's so silly down there. It looks like SpongeBob's house.
It is the coolest base. All the others are just like, we're up in the mountains and we've got a fortress.
Yeah, we have a room. But in the Mechanical Monsters, the guy does have a big mine, which answers the question that it was on everybody's minds. Where'd he get all that metal? It's a big smelting pot. But yeah, I feel like 9 people could watch these and have 9 different episodes. Like, there's something that just, one of them will, just like your heart leaps. It's exciting. It's invigorating.
Yeah. Nick, what was your favorite?
I think $1 Billion Limited, it did feel like these villains fighting, I guess because Superman does exist in this universe, but just, like if a villain were to face Superman now in the real world, they would have a concept of superheroes. These villains do not. And they're just trying to fight this demigod that is coming at them. And I just love that. And it definitely does feel the concept of like, what if we wrote a short where he was stronger than a train so people would believe it?
It does. Because Superman's never new in any of these. So it does kind of imply that like everybody is like, well, my plot is foolproof. Yeah. No way that guy's getting anywhere near me.
Or they don't believe that he's really there, and it's just like, oh, fuck, he's real. Jmike, how about you? Which one stood out the most?
Oh, man. Kaiju or giant robots?
The usual question.
I know, right? Or how about kaijus and giant robots? You can have both these days. I'll say the mechanical monsters. Just because, like, it's such a cool fight scene with him and the robots in the cave, and the Lois is like, "Help!" And the guy is like, he's twirling his evil mustache. Meow, he can't stop all the robots. I'll get away.
A couple of these guys were in like lab coats, like classic mad scientist. That man was in a tuxedo.
Yeah, he was in a tux. Wait, that one, yeah, that's really cool. A lot of really cool fight scenes. A lot of really cool, iconic like scenery and imagery.
Yeah,
really
that
good.
robot design is so good. Like the flaps that open up, like it doesn't make sense aerodynamically, but it feels like they're trying to make sense, and like I appreciate that a lot. And like feels like a biplane transformer, which is great. Like,
I mean, they're saying they could have had him fight dinosaurs and the robots at the same time.
I'm just saying, if there was continuity between each of these, you could have actually like really rolled into that. Like, oh, the Arctic Giant's loose. Let's get the robots together and hold it back. Up, Gigantic is loose. Let's go dethaw the Arctic Giant.
Was the radio show that deep? I know you said they had like 5-episode arcs, but whatever they go like, oh, Brainiac's back. I know this is before Brainiac, but like, were they self-referential, like building the world out?
They did really build out the world. They would have crossovers where like villains would like team up and stuff would come up.
Cool.
And like the radio show famously is like where we had like the Ku Klux Klan episode and like really deep like breakdowns of like social issues. Like I would say that like the one gripe I have with the Fleischer cartoons is that it made the perception of old school Superman material feel way more childish than necessarily the totality of it was, because these specifically were shorts for kids that we would put on, but the sister material is actually pretty deep. Like they have a lot of conversations about the death penalty, about like the treatment of prisoners, about like the nature of terrorism, because like there are like bomb threats and stuff that go on, and it's like, well, like how do we respond to those kind of situations? Like what kind of fear does that put in people? There are really cool plots. Like there is a train plot in the like the first arc that is really cool because trains just keep disappearing, and it turns out that they have a or like the villain of that story has found a spot where there are train tracks that run into what used to be a mine but is now like filled up with water from a dam, and that it's really hard to see the tracks because of brush and stuff. And so he's just like flipping the switch to like have the trains go off the rails into the water.
Oh, interesting.
And like it's really cool because like all these people are like disappearing, and like no one knows what to make of it. And like the threat is people not even being able to conceive of what is being done, and that's the power that this character has. It's he's not like a physical threat to Superman or anything like that. It's like, so those are cool. Like his henchman comes back and starts like working for someone else later. Like, so there are arcs where that kind of stuff happens a lot. And like generally speaking, Superman isn't able to solve the problems by way of being Superman. Clark Kent has to solve the mystery and then Superman shows up to like actually deal with the bad guys. And so those allow the stories to have like more legs to them, which is really cool. I'm a giant fan of the radio shows, and like this is doing a really good job distilling it down to 10 minutes, but there's definitely a space for a longer form of it than what we're getting here.
Yeah.
The reason why we haven't done this as like a big episode so far is because they're like these kind of like little snippets that like hit you and they're like, oh yeah, that was cool, moving on with my life. Hit you like, oh yeah, that was cool, moving on with my life. If people want to be hit with something else that is cool, why don't you guys talk about your podcast, City of Supers?
City of Supers is an improvised comedy talk show that takes place in a world of superheroes. I play Beck Wayward, sort of a Dick Grayson type who now in his 20s is retired and needs something to do with his life. So he starts a podcast interviewing supervillains and superheroes and anybody in between. And I'm joined by...
I play Donnie Dennis, who wants to be a superhero. The reason Beck and I know each other is because we were both part of the same orphanage, and the Ravaging Rat adopted him and not me. So we kind of had different lives growing up.
His parents in a circus accident fell on my parents. It's a lot of
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's a lot of the show's a lot of plays on classic tropes. A lot of the episodes are we're not interviewing Superman and Spider-Man. Like people will come on with an idea or a play on a character or like a superhero trope. It's really a smorgasbord, and there's a lot of really wonderful Philadelphia improvisers. It's a lot of fun, and we're bi-weekly. We're half an hour. As my girlfriend likes to say, it's the perfect amount of time to go to Trader Joe's and turn on a podcast. So we fit right in that niche. We just had our 1-year anniversary episode, which was a 2-parter, which if you're fans of the radio show of Superman, kind of more follows rather than sitting down, having an interview where we sort of go out into the field. And that's also a nice sort of buffet of folks because we have a bunch of recurring guests come back for that one. So I'd say start with those. And if you're a fan, go back, listen to their episodes. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, most anywhere you find your podcast. You can follow us online, City of Supers on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and City of Supers Pod on Twitter and YouTube. And if you want to become a maximum member on our Patreon, it's only $100 a month.
Yeah, Venmo us whatever amount, whenever. I don't know. We'll do something for you.
It's like back in the day when artists were trying to figure out how to do like musicians, I should say, were trying to figure out how not to do iTunes, but also put their stuff online. And it was just like the In Rainbows track for where it's just like, oh yeah, just whatever you think is a good amount from like we're Radiohead. We can take it, whatever. Yeah, no, everyone should absolutely go check that out. Where can people find you individually on the socials?
I'm awesome. I just left Twitter and I'm so happy about it.
Probably a good choice.
Thank you kindly. Nick, are you on socials that you would want people to follow?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't post anything important. I post City of Super stuff and then whatever my fiance tells me to post.
Oh, man.
Well, everyone should check out City of Supers, and then I guess they can't find you directly online, so don't find them online.
Yeah. Don't go looking.
Don't go looking. God damn it.
That's our business.
But check out City of Supers, and then circle back and check out what we're doing. Jmike, where can people find you and follow you?
Oh gosh, I feel like Nick here. Like I'm on there. I'm on the socials occasionally. But you can find me on Blue Sky and Twitter at Jmike101. I might post something occasionally if Case reminds me and tags me in something. I'm like, hey, that's really cool. Should totally go check that out. But yeah, that's where you can find me. I'm there.
As for me, you can find me on most socials at Case Aiken, except for Instagram, where I'm holding on to my AIM screen name for dear life, Quetzalcoatl 5, because I was a pretentious kid in high school. Also a Legion of Superheroes fan, because the 5 I actually chose. That wasn't just like a randomly assigned number. You can find the show on X at Men of Steel Pod. You can find stuff that we're putting up on the YouTubes at the Certain POV Media. Otherwise, you can head on over to certainpov.com, where you can find lots of great shows. Let's give a shout out to Jukebox Vertigo, which just came back from a brief hiatus, and they've reformatted a little bit because Josue has some life stuff going on. But Keith recently, as of the time recording, did an awesome episode that was a retrospective on the 80s and how that music is way better than people sort of like write off 80s music as, being, quote unquote, a bad decade for music. And they've got more stuff on the way. So check out Jukebox Vertigo. That's also a really fun show. You can find it at certainpov.com, along with more episodes of this show. You can find a link to our Discord server where you can come interact with us directly. It's a really fun time. And then aside from that, you can just find us here next time. And until then, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is scored and edited by Jeff Moonen. And our logo and episode art is by Case Aiken.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, a fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.